the whole matter so far, appearing Benjamin Kumbu appearing before the Parliament Public Accounts Committee and hinting us of all that we should expect that will make the nation even more sober, and the matters are rising.
Well, thank you very much, Samson, and good morning. Good morning to your viewers and listeners. Now, I think that it is fair to say that government has initiated the processes that would ensure that any person or group of persons who acted in a manner that was contrary to the interests of the state would be brought to justice. And I think that process is ongoing. I have, however, been shocked at the level of, if you like, recklessness that has been displayed in the discussion of matters surrounding this Woyome affair. Because I'm yet to recall in recent memory any instance where a matter in court has been discussed so extensively, and yet not a single person has been hauled before the courts to answer for charges of contempt of court. I think we all need to be circumspect in the discussion of these matters, because one is not guilty until he is proven guilty by a court of competent jurisdiction. I think that we ought to take note of that point.
I wanted to just put out that if the court were to cite people for contempt for going into the merits of this matter, I'm sure you would have been one of them. Well,
I've not discussed the merits of the matter, yes. Okay. So I've always stayed away from that. I've maintained that position. Right. Of course, there are other issues that you can discuss without risking that. Again, on the specific question of Mr. Martin Amidu's statements, for me, I think it's something of an irony that a man who was perceived by many people as being impervious to advice at the time that he was Attorney General would now purport to, as it were, counsel or advise the government, or if you like the Attorney General's department, on which steps to take to ensure that the state's interest is protected. Again, for a man who was quite hypersensitive to criticism, and you must understand that his travails or his woes started after some newspapers found it necessary to question his competence and his commitment to the fight against corruption. So for such, and he exploded and wrote a statement that we all found to be in very bad taste. Now for such a man to now turn around and criticize another Attorney General and the officers at the Attorney General's office for what he also perceives as a lack of competence is again mind-boggling. One is not too sure about the position of Martin Amidu. Is he admitting that when in office, it is prudent for people outside of that office to raise issues about your performance and criticize you accordingly?
He's seeking to offer advice in the fashion in which the matter ought to be prosecuted.
The issue is that
he's talking about poor representation in court.
I will deal with that. I will deal with those issues. But I'm only raising the point that Mr. Amidu, the reason why he finds himself in this position is that he was averse to advice. People have stated that when they dealt with him and tried to offer him advice, he rebuffed them and created the impression that he was a paragon of legal knowledge of some sort. Again, when he was criticized by newspapers, he went berserk and issued statements that were in extremely bad taste. So I find it a bit ironical that he would then assume this particular
He felt
posture.
attacked, not
Again,
criticized.
I'm not too... Well, put it whichever way. It's a matter of semantics. I think that those criticisms were they may have been misplaced in terms of factual accuracy. But nonetheless, people reserve the right to criticize public officials. I accept that. I think that Mr. Amidu should have accepted that when he was in the Attorney General's department. All of this would not have arisen had he been receptive, a bit more receptive to criticism. And to the extent that he himself deems it necessary to do this outside of the office, testifies to what I'm saying. Again, I'm not too sure whether he is not lining himself up to face charges of contempt, because he appears to delve extensively into the matters that are before the court. And for someone who was a chief or principal legal advisor of government, you would expect him to exercise a bit more circumspection when discussing these matters. Nonetheless, as a Ghanaian, he reserves the right, of course, to bring to the fore what he perceives are weaknesses or merits or demerits in the case that government is putting up. Again, he mentions specific individuals and seeks to level some allegations at them. He almost creates the impression that there's a clique of civil servants at the Attorney General's outfit who put pressure on him to do things that were not necessarily in the interest of the state, i.e. withdraw the writ that was pending before the courts in the civil matter, and then create a situation where an additional $9 million could be paid to, or an additional 9 million Ghana cedis could be paid to Mr. Woyome. Again, what it does is that for those people who have hailed Mr. Hamidu as the very definition of anti-corruption, I mean members of the NPP, his statements shatter some of the claims that they've been making over this period. For instance, it has been suggested that government is making scapegoats out of civil servants. Now, Mr. Hamidu says, at least he mentions the Solicitor General, he mentions other key operators within the government legal apparatus as persons who were scheming, as it were, to rein in the wheels of justice and create conditions for additional money to be paid to Mr. Woyome. He also specifically mentions the Solicitor General. And in all this, I've heard MPP activists and commentators on this matter create the impression that somehow the Solicitor General was unaware of the happenings surrounding this Woyome case. She was shoved aside and things were done on her blind side. Mr. Hamidu's statement, I beg your pardon, shows clearly that those positions that they took were false. Again, it must be stated clearly that it is wrong for anybody to assume that it is Mr. Hamidu who has taken on this fight at a personal level to bring to justice persons who have committed crimes against the state. It is Mrs. Betty Modidisu, the former Attorney General, who put in this writ at the instance of the President long before Mr. Hamidu came into office. Now, when Mr. Hamidu came into office, it is important to realize that he also stayed there for 1 whole year without taking any action on this case. Again, in his own words, when he went to court a few weeks ago or a few months ago, he said that he did it at the instance of the President. So I find it strange that people would say that somehow government is involved in a cover-up and that it is Mr. Hamidu who is championing the fight against corruption, and he is the only person in Ghana who is determined to retrieve these monies for the state. I think that this statement clearly exposes that flaw in the argument that they are making. Okay. But look, the President has committed himself on several occasions to doing whatever it takes to ensure that the monies are retrieved and persons who are found culpable punished. Mr. Hamidu's statement also puts, a nail in the coffin of those who believe somehow that there is a grand governmental conspiracy to take monies belonging to the state to give to Martin Hamidu just for the purposes of financing the campaign of the President in 2012. That is belied by the claims that Mr. Hamidu makes in his own statement. So yes, we welcome the statement. It is a bit ironical, but we can forgive that. But it shows clearly that indeed government is doing the right. As for his argument that there is not much commitment to fighting the case, I'm not too sure what he means exactly by that, because it is practically the same team that he assembled to prosecute the case that Mr. Kumbo is using now.
Well, but finally, he feels that members of that particular team, some of them are in a position of conflict and ought to recuse themselves or be asked to do so. You know, this is how I intended that we start. You do about 5 minutes of your preliminary, and then we come back, and so that I don't get to dictate how you begin. All right. Nana.
Yeah. Morning, Samson. Good morning to your listeners. The matters of Woyome are very interesting, and they don't seem to want to go away. And indeed, they will not go away until there is final closure on this matter. My brother Felix made some interesting conclusions, which I'd like to start with. That he said that Hamidu's letter shatters some perceptions of the NPP. And then he goes on to mention that the NPP had accused the government of the NDC of making scapegoats out of civil and public servants. And so Hamidu's letter shatters that perception. Well, I don't know if that will bear up to scrutiny.
In fact, Chief State Attorney Samuel Nekwe Tete believes so. He feels that you have government officials just who have power, you know, and can command all the state apparatus on their behalf, are trying to make scapegoats out of some of them.
Exactly. Exactly. So that contradicts what Felix is saying, but I'll deal with that. Now, Martin Hamidu, he's gradually writing his name in the history of politics in Ghana as an anti-corruption crusader.
Really?
Well, the way things seem to be going, the way he is conducting himself, especially with this Woyome matter. He wrote a letter when he was still the substantive Minister for Justice and Attorney General. In that first letter, he talked about threats to his personal safety. He talked about media attacks that had been launched against him by people from his own party. He talked about how those attacks have been orchestrated by a colleague in cabinet. And he also talked about the commitment of gargantuan crimes. This was all in his first letter that he wrote when he was still the Minister for Justice. He talked about a cover-up that is going on, and he was being attacked because he was trying to uncover the cover-up that is going on. And as a result of his efforts to uncover the cover-up, he had become subjected to attacks orchestrated by colleague minister in cabinet. Then he loses his position maybe a week or two after. And then I think this week he writes a second letter where he talked about specifically about the Attorney General's Department and the Ministry of Justice, and said that there are public servants in there who he believes have not shown the needed competency in protecting the nation against this loss. And that he was signaling a warning that if those people are there and still working for the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General, then it might compromise the ability of the state to prosecute whatever it wants to prosecute against Mr. Woyome. So he's written two letters that signal strongly of a cover-up and how he has suffered because of his efforts to uncover the cover-up, and he's also extended the cover-up to public servants working at the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General. Now, Felix tries to tell us that there's no cover-up and that public servants are those that have been involved in this gargantuan loss. Now, Samson, it will be extremely difficult for anybody to believe or accept that public servants working in the ministry's department and agencies can spring the loss of 52 million Ghana cedis on the people of this country, not by stealing, not by under-invoicing or collusion with some accountants, but direct instructions to the Bank of Ghana and for the Bank of Ghana to release these monies to an individual. Public servants do not have the capacity. Public servants work towards their political bosses. The ministers of state, the district chief executives, the chief executive officers appointed by the president, and so on. The public servants work up to their political bosses. The ministers, the DCs, the CEOs of state institutions appointed by the president. And the political authorities work up to the president. So public servants only offer advice, and they work to the instructions issued by the political authorities. People working in the Attorney General's office can only work at the instructions of the Attorney General, and they can only proffer advice to the Attorney General. People working at the Ministry of Finance can only proffer advice to the political authorities, and they would only work as instructed by the political authorities. Same as the ministers also work up to the president. Okay. So, you want me to?
Yeah, no, just hold it there, because like I introduced earlier, this is the plan. We do 5 minutes each, and then we come and I'll be putting my questions also to you.
So let me just conclude then.
Do that in a minute so we go on.
Okay. So it will be difficult for anybody to accept that attorneys at the Ministry of Justice are able to collude and spring this huge loss of monies to the country, and that they are the people who have done that and they should be prosecuted, as if they had worked completely outside the ambit of their political authorities. Nobody will accept that in this country.
Thank you, Nana Kumia. Now, James, what do you also have to say? The matters arising from all of the judgment that matters.
Thank you, Senior Counsel, and good morning to the rest of our panelists and to our television viewers and radio listeners. Well, for me, I think that, generally speaking, I welcome Mr. Martin Amidu's statement. I think that within our constitutional dispensation, anybody else, including Mr. Martin Amidu, or is everyone else, including Mr. Martin Amidu, has a right to freely express himself. I mean, as to whether you agree with those expressions or not is another matter altogether. I've been trying to situate, is it an advice or a caution or a warning, whatever it is that is coming from Mr. Martin.
It appears to be doing both, cautioning and advising.
Well, I'm not too sure what it is. In this citizen vigilante statement, you get a sense that Mr. Martin Amidu seemed to say that anything short of him, the state is unlikely to be successful in its handling of this matter. I mean, if you listen or read his statement carefully, but there are fundamental issues to be asked, because he raises issues about the competence of these officers at the Attorney General's
and the probability that they may have been compromised in the process.
Well, but for me, I like to ask those fundamental questions. We had the immediate past Attorney General. I mean, at least His Excellency the President had entrusted him with that office for close to 1 year. The question is, did he query any of these officers over competency issues when he noticed that their quality itself was a problem, as he puts it? That's a fair question to ask. One would have expected that, I mean, in this citizen vigilante statement, he would have indicated with some clear examples, perhaps with dates over certain specific issues and how he queried them over their competence or incompetence issues. The other question to ask is that when you have a minister of Justice and Attorney General who's been entrusted with that position for close to a year, and you say that these things have come to your notice, the other question to ask is, what structural changes did he make to the place? What steps did he take? Did he, for example, communicate to his superiors? And you do know that ministers also have their superiors, say to the Chief of Staff or to the Office of the President, about whatever it was he considers to be challenges facing the AG's department in terms of the quality and competence of the personnel and also the way forward. That you don't clearly see. You don't see any sign of that at all in Mr. Martin Amidu's statement. His gargantuan statements, the one he issued much earlier, yeah, seems to be getting clearer with this citizen vigilante.
How exactly?
In that statement, in the gargantuan statement, I mean, which was not too clear, and he left all of us wondering what he meant. He was talking about a cabinet minister. And you recall our friends on the other side, the mischievous interpretation which was given it by particularly the NPP and their communicators about how Mr. Martin Amidu was talking about the entire cabinet. I mean, how anybody interprets a cabinet minister to mean an entire cabinet is only revealing of a certain level of thinking. You know, so that again was shocking. But I'm happy that this citizen vigilante statement is elucidating his earlier position. At least now he's clarifying the matters. Clearly now he was talking about this judgment debt, or is it this Woyome debt issue. And I get a bit surprised by those who like to let all of us believe that Mr. Martin Amidu deserves a standing ovation or an applause for being the #1 anti-corruption campaigner. I mean, we had even been told some time back that, oh, he was a whistleblower and all of that. Whatever he was blowing the whistle on, we are yet to be convinced about that. But who is this whistleblower or anti-corruption campaigner that even in his effort, as he claims, to unravel these things, still makes deliberate effort to protect others? In that gargantuan statement, he had spoken about a cabinet minister. Only this week, he's told us that apparently there were more to that. There are also public servants or officers at the AG's department inclusive. Was he protecting anybody? Is that what whistleblowers do? Is that what anti-corruption campaigners do? I mean, what is providing the motivation for unleashing these names on us at this time? I think that if you are committed to a certain process, you believe in anti-corruption and all of that, then you don't protect anybody. You go the full haul and make your total, full and complete revelations over these matters. All of us, and I'm sure that across the political divide, all of us would admit that, yes, we do know, we are aware of the challenges at the AG's department. That's a statement of fact. I think that these are matters that we ought not politicize and find a common way forward in terms of dealing with those issues. But it's also instructive to say that it is this same team that the Honorable Attorney General, Dr. Benjamin Kumbo, is working with, and only this week were successful in getting the court to grant them leave in order to amend its writ of summons and its statement of claim. Even more importantly is that this is a matter that you would notice that aspects of it is still under investigations. You would notice that the IOCO report itself had said it was an interim report. That tells you that it is not conclusive. Indeed, only this morning, the Daily Graphic is reporting that the police are questioning Waterville's representative in this matter. It tells you that the state continues to push this matter. We've not come to the end of the road at all. Indeed, investigation is ongoing. You know, for me, I think that what even excites me some more is the fact that this citizen vigilante statement makes well, it totally discounts the. I think my choice of word was going to be something else.
All right, so maybe totally
you take yeah. I mean, let me tidy up on that. It totally discounts the NPP's position that, well, even the public servants have been shoved aside. The Solicitor General knew nothing about it. Go back to the citizen vigilante statement, and you would notice the names that are being pushed there by the Attorney General.
Okay, this is Newsfile on Joy 99.7 FM. You can hear us on Love FM in Kumasi and a dozen of affiliates across the country. Also at www.myjoyonline.com. You are watching us on your Joy News channel on Multi TV. Now, this show is brought to you by TTB, Unique Insurance, DefTraco, and MTN. Now, you can send us text messages 1422 and 1760 on any of the three major headlines that I have told you about that we are looking at. Now, Kuku, in 5 minutes, let me have your preliminary comments about matters arising from.
A quick one at this point about the potential for committing contempt of court. It's there, that's true. If things were to be, perceived in a very strict manner. You are a lawyer, so the point Felix made.
We have two lawyers here.
Yeah, three of you, and me. So that's there. I will not discount that. But if it were ever to happen, then Woyome himself, his lawyers, and all of us will be before the court for that. So that should tell you the public interest impact of this particular story. Just like the
So there's an exception should be made in this matter?
Not exactly. In law you can't, can you? I'm not sure you can.
Certainly.
But I'm saying that sometimes the force of public interest is such that it overwhelms everybody to the extent that even the courts and the litigants all decide that let's ignore this potential for contempt of
and even
court.
Justice Barbara Kayensu, who is sitting over the civil process in the commercial court, also makes reference to the fact that this matter has gained such huge public interest, and so she's careful about it. Also, Nassan, also in the financial court, he also made similar comments about the fact of the public interest that this matter has generated.
It may have its positive aspect too. It makes everybody cautious so that we are all sure we are meticulous with how things are done, so that the end result is not subject to dispute. It's very critical for this country's own growth, you know, in terms of the rule of law and our own commitment to the judicial processes. Having said that, I proceed to the Martin thing because it's a linkage. You see, motive, what is it? You can question it here and there. We all know that as we speak, we really don't have the exact reason why Martin was dismissed. We're giving some reasons. If we had not been given the reasons, perhaps we would have allowed this matter to die a natural death, because the president is not obliged to give any reason. If you recall, the first report created the impression that he had misconducted himself at a meeting between him, the president, and some ministers behind
closed. That's what we were told officially.
Yes, behind closed doors. And then subsequently, we were even told that he actually went begging or so. I've forgotten which one came first. There was some contradiction with the two reports that came from the state-owned Daily Graphic, both sourcing official circles. So there's a hanging out there, and people made a point. Then give us more details. But that again is, so I'm saying that there's a little gray area surrounding the exact reason why Martin was dismissed. Unfortunately, because his first statement had spoken of some conspiracy, gargantuan fraud, a crime that some colleague minister, together with a rented criminal, and I'm quoting because I don't believe in that description of a section of the NDC press, everybody linked the dismissal to Woyome saga. And so to say, the assumption is quite a safe one to make in terms of the mix of the issues out there. So here we are, back again. He's issued a second statement. And there, he's raised some issues. It's been countered by Nekwe, is it? Which I think we should also take another critical look at. But he's raised the issue, the quality of legal representation relative to the ongoing Woyome case. What does it mean by quality of legal representation? You may get the understanding of it if you read further into his statement. You see, he's not talking of the credentials, the professional credentials, the qualification of those personalities is mentioned, the Solicitor General, the Chief State Attorney, and the Senior State Attorney. I think it's more of their commitment to this case that is at stake here, because it tells you of a memo that they had written. It doesn't specify, but the impression I get from this statement is that the memo could have come from the Solicitor General and the Senior State Attorney, if you read carefully. Yes, it doesn't tell us which one.
The Solicitor General, he supported the memoranda by two.
Yes, so we see we are talking here of commitment and their understanding of the issue. If you read that memoranda he's talking about, because he told us that that was leaked to the Daily Post and was published in the 6th January 2012 edition of the Daily Post. I've taken my time to go back and read that particular memorandum. And honestly, to be honest with you, if indeed this was the opinion, the advice articulated and delivered to Attorney General then Martin Amidou by the Solicitor General and the two state attorneys, then I wonder, unless there's been a very drastic and dramatic revision of opinion on the part of these personalities, who are incidentally part of the ongoing case, assisting the incumbent Attorney General. Am I right? In this case, unless there's been a drastic, I repeat, and dramatic revision of their opinions and the understanding of the issue, then, to be honest with you, I share Martin's view that their commitment is suspect.
And what they sought to do,
the advice here,
was that.
Let me tell you. I mean, the advice here, in terms of real law, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm a pocket one, the street type. I'm the street type. But what I do is to consult lawyers, consult judges, and read a lot of legal things. That's what I do.
All right.
I won't pretend to have any competence in terms of technical and professional understanding. Look, in here, there is an issue. The Ajumamenu letter of 4th May 2005. The understanding they had of that letter was to the effect that letter, don't forget that Attorney General then was in court suggesting that, look, I've discovered this letter, and this letter had a disclaimer, and the disclaimer meant that we had made a mistake.
Yeah.
This advice sought to say that no, that's not a correct understanding. That the second part is what says that government will not be legally responsible for anything, but the first part was a commitment by government. So if the thing succeeded, then we ought to pay, so we must pay. That's the explanation they give to that letter of introduction, which today we all know, based on even what the incumbent Attorney General is doing in court, is rendered useless relative to Woyome's case, but strengthens government's case, the state's case. Then they go for the Central Tender Review Board's concurrent approval of August 5th, 2005, also as a pillar in strengthening this advice. So in a way advising the Attorney General that we might as well forget this case and rather go settling. That concurrent approval, again, if the Attorney General had sought professional and technical advice from the procurement board authority, is it a procurement authority, or any procurement expert relative to the procurement law, the Central Tender Review Board's concurrent approval does not amount to an award of contract. It does not amount to notification of award of contract. And indeed, it is not what you can use to relate to this article, the section 65(4) of the procurement authority, which says that if you get to that stage, none of the parties can reverse. This is documented. It's a law. So if people who are in the legal department of government and who were leading this then and are still part of this process now, if this is their opinion, take it from me, their commitment is suspect. So if Martin were to raise the alarm, perhaps it's been suggested that he could have called Kumbo and told, or he could have put it in a writing style. Maybe that would have been okay, to be honest with you. He may have also decided that because of the public interest nature and the suspicion of some kululu, he would decide to go ahead and do it public. He chose that option.
All right.
But to be honest, you could have chosen the other option. But based on the content of this advice, which was leaked, and when it was leaked, it was published in a way to make Martin look bad, like a stubborn, intransigent person who, in spite of the quality of this legal advice, was proving intransigent.
All right.
Please.
Now, Kuku.
Okay,
yes.
Okay. No, you must respect your table, your chair, the chair. So you proceed. Proceed.
Or both.
I will return.
Both.
I will return, and then we would throw the floodlights more on and focus it on some of the key matters that have come up. Remember, I am mentioning Dr. Benjamin Kumbo's alert of a more sobering judgment debt, and also Nekwe Tete's reply, and you have had a reply from Woyome's lawyers. We'll put all of that in focus and look at the issue a little more from that perspective. Michael Tete in Tema says, for Tema workers, the citizen vigilante call is worth the cause, and we believe the seat of the presidency needs a democratic cleansing. I need some explanation of that. Richard in Koranza writes, where is Achuna Brenchu, the communication liaison for Alfred Woyome? Achuna Brenchu is here in the GH. Razak Zenu writes, the NPP must know that election 2012 will be conducted on the ground and not in the media. God bless President Mills. Oh, I see. Don't underestimate the media. Osman Akrokeri writes, the NDC should give us a break. What shows that they were not the people who stole those files just to cover Woyome. Okay, now taking it from the very last file about the files that are said to have been missing, to have gone missing, well, Dr. Benjamin Kombuo confirmed that files have gone missing, and indeed not only files related to the Woyome or the Waterville or those contracts, but some other files. And he gave an indication that the nation might weep when other other judgment debts are exposed. Is that something, start with James, that's something that we ought to know, that we are being delayed getting to know what it is about judgment debts?
Well, I don't quite understand it, but I think I can deal with the issues generally. Let me say, I mean, starting off from where we left off, that in this whole judgment debt issue, even though I welcome Mr. Martin Amidu's statement, I do not think that he can take the moral high ground. You know, indeed, the President Mills has been guided by one thing and one thing only, to see to the bottom of this matter, regardless of who is involved.
But other matters are popping up.
Well, but that's why these matters themselves are not conclusive at this point. That's why we have investigations ongoing by the police, by IOCO. Matters.
Public Accounts Committee is also looking into the CP1 construction plan.
Yeah, I've heard people who even think that. I've heard people who even think that the Public Accounts Committee has become a propagandist tool for a certain side of a political divide. Well, that's another matter altogether. But you know, the point really. Okay, why are you laughing? I mean, the point. No. I mean, it's fair comment. The point really is that President Mills, from day one, has been committed to getting to the bottom of this matter. And if you've listened to him carefully, I think there's something he says that it doesn't matter whose ox is God. What it means is that regardless of who is involved, the state will go to the bottom of this matter, and what is right, he says. What is wrong. Justice will be done. Come what may. Really, the president's commitment predates Mr. Martin Amidu going to the Ages Department. So, again, it's important to put that in context.
You're talking about his announcement and asking the IOCO to go into the matter. We're talking
about the president's commitment that this is not a matter that can be taken lightly, and that officers at the Ages Department, including the then AG, could not have folded their arms and legs and say that this is not a matter that we are unable to defend, or that we do not have any valid defense.
We have moved on from there. We have moved on from there. And Martin Amidu, like you said, is cautioning and giving advice. He says that the legal representation, he thinks, is not solid enough, and more importantly, because some of the people, three of the people who are doing, as it were, who are doing the legwork and doing all the paperwork involved in this particular matter, appear compromised. Something
you notice that, I mean, we have not moved on from there. You consistently hear the NPP and their deliberate effort to draw in the president in this judgment that matter. We can understand them, because the upcoming elections is also about a test of character. And we are happy that, at least on both sides, it's been welcomed. We are happy that at least the flag bearer of the NPP has welcomed, this test of character issue, even though when he welcomed it at their Manchagbona rally, he did not really talk about character. He was talking about economic performance and achievements of government. I'm not sure how, again, to situate that when we welcome
it is government's desire to win this matter in court.
It is government's desire
to have justice done.
Exactly.
Okay.
And to make sure that the public purse is protected.
Okay.
And to make sure that the interest of Ghana and Ghanaians reign supreme. That is the commitment and conviction of the president.
Okay.
This conviction and commitment predates Mr. Martin Amidu going to the Ages Department.
And specific, you don't expect that, for example, if Martin Amidu raises issues with the three top principal officers in the Attorney General's department, and suggests that these people may have been compromised because they sought to ask him to withdraw the pending suits in the pending civil matter and also to pay the accrued interest of 9 million Ghana cedis. He feels that these people must first of all should have been guided to say we recuse ourselves, or that they should be asked to do so, because it doesn't help the state.
Brilliant question.
And he says that there were also other, strategies that were discussed, which he feels that ought to be taken into consideration.
Brilliant question, fantastic question, and I agree with you on that. You've heard many of my colleagues actually welcome Mr. Martin Amidu's statement, and on this same program I have done same. I have no difficulty at all. I think that it is only when Kweku spoke that Mr. Martin Amidu's position became even more clear. I think Kweku threw some more light on that, because I had come under the impression, reading the statement, that he was talking about competence. But now, because he talks about the quality of legal representation, that's, for me, is only synonymous with the competence of these lawyers to handle that issue. But Kweku tells me that that's not what he meant, and that he's rather talking...
That's my understanding.
Oh, that's your understanding. Because, okay, your understanding is that he's talking about the fact that the officers are rather conflicted, and not because
of the additional input he made.
Okay, and not because they are incompetent. I think that we are talking about two different issues. It is different to say somebody is incompetent, and then it is another thing altogether to say that somebody is conflicted. The person can be competent, but he's conflicted to the extent that he or she has a vested interest in the outcome or in giving his or her conduct in a certain sense. My point is that at this point, the questions to ask is whether or not these officers, at any rate, they still remain officers of a state, hired by the taxpayer, paid by the taxpayer to do a certain job. It is true. It is true that even if you have the brightest of cases and you do not have an equally bright legal representation, that could go against you. Bad legal representation.
The people he talks about, one is already facing criminal prosecution, but the two others are still in office, and there's those working on these files. Is there a setting expectation?
Well, given that the matter no longer has to do with the competence, but rather about the fact that certain officers are conflicted, I believe that it will be worth the while for the AG to now look into these matters with these officers. But having said that, let me point out that we are confident in the Honorable Attorney General, Honorable Dr. Ben Kumbo. We are confident. Indeed, only this week, he was in the Supreme Court on the day that this matter was pending in the High Court, and then just one day after, he was successful in getting a ruling in favor of the state in this Balkan matter with the Republic of Ghana and all of that. So we are confident about the Attorney General and his handling of this issue. We believe that he's competent enough to do a good job at this. Plus,
on a strictly professional level, I think that he's very inspiring in the manner he's conducting himself as the Attorney General.
No doubt about that. It is not for nothing that this is by all accounts, and I do not intend.
My question is that: is there not a desire to have him ask these state officials to step aside for now? I'm saying that. No, I have just. In the interest of the Republic doing justice in this matter.
That's, you see, then there's a presumption that Mr. Martin Amidu's statement is all correct and all of that. I think that what must happen is that, given that now the issues are becoming clearer, we are being told that it may not be about competence, but rather about the fact that the officers may be competent, however, they may be conflicted. I think it will be worth the while for the AG to now look into these matters. But having said that, I'm saying that the AG, guided by the conviction and commitment of the president, will make sure that the interest of Ghanaians remains supreme, and that we'll go into the bottom of this matter. Nobody is going to be shielded in this matter. But subsequent to that, you've also learned about files disappearing. This is not just files about Waterville. Indeed, when my colleague Samuel Okujeto-Ablakwa first put this information out about files disappearing, we heard responses and reaction from our friends on the other side, the MPP, telling us about, oh, there these guys go again. I mean, this story is laughable. Some said that it was not even true. Subsequent to that, we provided a list of the files which disappeared. You know, about 12 files or 13 files, all of them missing from the Ministry of Finance. A similar number also disappearing from the AG's department. How all these files managed to develop legs and wings and disappeared from the Finance Ministry and the AG's department itself. And I'm not sure that this is a mere coincidence. Look, the file list, some of the files missing. You have MOF/OSM/108, Office of Senior Minister. That file is gone. You have MOF/Cabinet.003, Cabinet Decisions, is disappeared. You have MOF/NSC002, National Security Council, nowhere to be found. MOF/PJ/002E, Presidential Jet. That's the file on the presidential jet. Nobody knows where that file is. There is MOF/OVP/002C, Office of the President. We don't know where it is. MOF/MTP, you know, that's Memo to Parliament, disappeared. There's one on HIPIC. Nobody knows where these files are. You know, when we said...
Can I ask this? That these files, you can find them. Have you been able to establish at what point they went out of, you know, where they were supposed to be? And if you have established so, what is the difficulty in getting the files back? For as long that you can establish those who had control over these files or who ought to have control over these files, is there not a very simple legal process that you can use to compel the production of these files? Yes.
I mean, we are not sleeping on our rights at all as a government. We are not reneging on our duty to ensure that we get to the bottom of this matter. Indeed, these files disappeared upon the coming into office of His Excellency President Mills's government. I mean, so right from day one. I mean, look, even if you went to I'm sure the local authority school in this neighborhood, and you want your exercise books for last term, I'm sure the class captain will be in a better position to reproduce that. But you had a situation where you go to the Chief of Staff office, and I mean Honorable Kwejo O Impieni, his office, and there's zero file. I mean, how does anybody explain this? How do you situate things that the Chief of Staff, who is the head of administration at the presidency, there's not a single file in his office?
Yes, so that's what I'm saying. You know, exactly. the individual who had control over or ought to have control over these files, and you can't find them now. What is the process?
No,
compel the production.
I think I'd like to look at rather the reaction of the MPP. I'd like to rather look at the reaction of the MPP to this story when we put it out. Before I even come to this, what did they say? Oh, this story is not true. It's laughable. I mean, discount this. It's just an attempt to sidetrack issues. You can have a look at this. It tells you the steps being taken by government. This is Dr. Akoto Osei, dated 4th day of May 2011.
And the letterhead is the Serious Fraud Office.
Okay, and he's talking about those same files and how those files were carted to the office of the president. It is here. The very people who are denying. I think that when it comes to Ghana at 50, Dr. Charles Rekubrobe almost said in no same words though, but his point had almost been that, look, I'm not going to give you these files without a fight. He had to be threatened with state security, that if you fail to make these files available, we'll make state security come to your residence to come and conduct a search.
Is that what happened?
Well, finally, he had to yield, and by which he sent one Otia Sante, Foster Jemfi, and Nanaya Oyanka to deliver these 83 files. All 83 files on Ghana are 50. Totally disappeared.
He's been giving some explanation. You're not satisfied with that?
What explanation? What explanation has he been? I am not aware. Since you know, you may tell us, and I'm not sure that our viewers and listeners have followed his explanation.
I'll return to that shortly. Thank you very much, James. Now, Nana, let me come to you. You're being accused of having depended on Martin Amidu and giving him a status that he does not deserve, of someone who is interested in protecting the public purse in the whole judgment debt matter. Now, there's a posture he has carried in the period that Nekwe Tete, Samuel Nekwe Tete, who is the embattled Chief State Attorney, is now questioning him. For example, I read a line in his letter that he wrote in response to Martin Amidu's recent letter. He says that, I do not recall that Mr. Amidu refused payment as he claims. What he said, and which was giving wide coverage in the press, was that we should have been aware of the merits or demerits of the case before we issued the writ. We issued the writ against Mr. Woyome, and that he was not going to countermand, that is instructive, to countermand the instructions of his predecessor, that is Betty Modi Drisu. The instructions that Betty had given, he was not going to countermand that. That the Solicitor General then asked me to go to court since Mr. Adadivo had traveled outside the country to request for an adjournment on the grounds that we were awaiting the AG's instructions on the matter with regard to the settlement on the payment of the interest, since the principal amount had been paid. I did go to court and reported back that the court had given us a date to settle on the issue of interest. It was this report that the Solicitor General took to the Accountant General, took to the Attorney General, and he gave further instructions indicating that he had no problem with the case being settled, provided that it was done professionally.
Well, Samson, the former Attorney General and Minister for Justice, Mr. Amidu, I am sure will be able to defend himself against what Mr. Nekwe is saying. You
took his word. Nekwe too has his word. And he's saying that this man should not be believed to the point that some have sought to believe him.
I understand that clearly. So it's Nekwe's word and Amidu's word. And I'm sure the two of them are competent to sort it out. We are looking at Amidu's public conduct. And we're saying that it is commendable. This case, to all intents and purposes, had been stopped, finished September 2010. When the Attorney General went to court to ask for a stay of execution, the stay of execution was granted by the court partially, and that was the last time. The next thing that we heard was that 3 months after the court itself had granted a partial stay, the Attorney General goes into a pre-trial conference again with Woyome and agrees to pay him all the money in December 2010. And indeed, all the monies were paid in the subsequent months. And indeed, there was no recourse to the court again, as far as we know, until more than 1 year after, in December 2011, when Amidu took up the case again. So to all intents and purposes, the case had been finished. Amidu took it up again 1 year after, and then he came under attack, according to his own words, and he managed to put it out that this is what is happening, and he suffered a loss of his position for it. We were told that he was sacked for misconduct. What misconduct, we don't know. What we know is the letter that he wrote about the attacks he was facing from inside his own government. Now, if he has been sacked for misconduct, those people, those officials, ministers of state who were responsible for the payment of these monies to Woyome, they have not been sacked or questioned for misconduct. So, Mr. Amidu, compared to what is happening with his former colleagues, has done something that is commendable. Now, these missing documents matter. We were told here last week by my friend.
But Nana, I was asking that, how do you feel to hear that Martin Amidu who's made the whole world to believe that he is the anti-corruption fighter, lead crusader, was really not against the payment of the monies that he now tells us that he is against.
Something I've told you that this is one person's word against the other person's word.
How do you feel about that?
I'll just wait for the resolution of the matter. I don't feel either way about it. I mean, he says this person, these people didn't do their work well. The other people are saying, no, we did our work well. That's an issue that they can interrogate. And I'm sure they will interrogate. These are not small personalities. Senior state prosecutors, former Minister for Justice. So he's saying, I don't trust these people. They didn't give me good advice. They didn't listen to me. They also say, no, we gave you good advice and you agreed with our advice. The two of them will sort it out. But I'm just looking at this public conduct. That's what I've outlined to you, that it shows it deserves a certain commendation. Okay. And the matter is still unfolding. Okay.
And again, Nana, you see, we do not know that Martin Amidu and current Attorney General are fighting. Why do you think that he will not seek to rather get into conference with Benjamin Kombo and state these issues and give the advice that he's seeking to do? Talk about strategies that were discussed about how to go ahead and prosecute the civil matter, and also raise seeking to raise questions of potential bias about the officials handling it. Why do you think he will not go into conference with this man rather than make it public and for the first time?
Well, you can also ask the same question, that before he put out in public that he was coming under attack from inside his own government and all of that, why didn't he put it before the president, for example? We don't know if he did so, and if his advice was ignored, and if he felt so strongly about it that he thought he should put it in the public domain. We don't know. We have to wait for further developments on the matter. For all you know, he had discussed this with the relevant personalities, and he felt that he wasn't making enough progress. So we have to wait. Now, this missing documents matter was raised here by my good friend, Mr. Okujeto.
That's James Boating.
Sorry?
You mean the last time it was raised by Okujeto when he was on the show?
Yes.
Okay.
I think, oh, yeah, you were not here, but just last week. And we're just discussing this Woyome matter, and he put it out that there are missing documents, and that has hampered the government's ability to act the way that it should. And we found it difficult to believe what you were saying. Indeed, the very next day, he was on your station, and he had given an interview, and he sought to move the missing documents from just Woyome and talked about other missing documents and so on. Right after him, the Attorney General, Dr. Kumbo, also came and also narrowed it to Woyome and what have you. So there's some sort of contradiction between what Okujeto was saying on the program and what the Attorney General was saying. But
as I heard the Attorney General, he did not narrow it to Woyome.
I also heard
on Newsfile and on Newsnight, and he said that the documents are not only in respect of Woyome, but that in respect of Woyome, he mentioned a file that had gone missing.
Well, he gave, I think he spoke for 3-4 minutes. If you play it, I mean, I'm sure. But be that as it may, and these missing documents at this time, we're talking about Woyome, if you didn't have your government and you did not have sufficient documents, what was the basis of your dealings with Mr. Woyome? That you are a responsible government, you did not have documents, and you proceeded to pay so much money to one person based on the claims that he made? What was the basis? And when you decided that you had a defense, what was the basis of your defense? You obviously had documents that you thought you could proceed. It turns out that it's the same letter. On one hand, they took the first part of the letter to say that Woyome had a case. And then a few months down the line, they took the second part of the letter to say that Woyome hasn't got a case. The same document. And we've been told that the president tried to stop the payments on 2 occasions. There must be some basis for the president ordering that the payment be stopped and that defense be mounted. So there was, and Iyoko itself had stated that there were enough grounds to mount a defense. So if this late in the day, more than 1 year after the monies have been paid, and there's a public outcry, we are being told that there's missing documents, it's difficult to swallow. Now, every ministry, department, and agency, and those were the issues that we were putting to the deputy minister. Every ministry, department, and agency has a registry where records are kept. In fact, it's the registry that deals with letters, make copies for the archive, and then send relevant copies to the relevant officers in the ministry or agency or department. They keep the file of all the archival material. They keep the file. Files are not kept in a minister's office. When you go to a minister's office, there is a security cabinet with security locks and all of that, meant for keeping particularly cabinet documents, because cabinet documents you cannot keep. And even that, every 2 weeks or so, people go around and collect those cabinet documents from the offices of the ministers. But files are not kept in the offices of ministers. They are kept at a registry. And if you want a particular file for a certain reference or whatever, you sign for it.
Is it every file?
That is what it's supposed to be. So if somebody collected a file, there should be a record of it. If Nana Kumia had gone to collect a file on some matter, there should be a record of it. There's a records officer who has to show us where the file is.
Okay.
And so if you spoke to some minister April last year, and up to now, you haven't managed to resolve the matter, that you spoke to Akutu say about missing and he told you what he knew about it. And 1 year down the line, or almost 1 year down the line, we still, the state with all the apparatus cannot resolve the matter, and we are just come to sit on radio and television and talk about it. It's difficult to understand.
Nana, just give me a minute. I want us to proceed also and to look at something that Nekwe Tete says in his statement. I had referred you to portions of Amidu's statement, Nekwe Tete's statement. I want first of all to listen to the one of Mr. Woyome's lawyers. I'm talking about Roxin Dafiamepo. He spoke to the morning show and spoke in respect of money that is said reported in the interim report of Yoko to have been given to Nekwe Tete's wife or paid through her account, what that money was meant for. Let's quickly hear Roxin Dafiamepo, and then I'll ask a question.
Mr. Woyome's relationship with Mrs. Nekwe Tete.
Now, I'll tell, it's also about a land transaction. He also purchased a land from them.
From the state attorney handling his case's wife?
Yes, and this was after about 10 months.
From the, okay, hold on, let me see if I understand you. He purchased the land from the Nekwe family?
Yes.
That would be the state attorney's family, not his wife?
No, I believe the land was then in the name of Nekwe and his wife and some other family persons. So the money that he paid to Mrs. Nekwe was for the land. The documents are there.
So let me see if I understand you. The state attorney handling his case,
yes,
sold land to him.
Yes.
And that's what he was paying for.
Yes.
And again, that doesn't strike you as curious?
No, because I'm a lawyer. I come across these things every time. Every time.
All right. Thank you very much. And that is Roxin Dafiamepo. He is one of the lawyers for Alfred Agbesi Woyome. And that is his explanation to the issue that was raised in the Iyoko report about money that was paid to the wife of Nekwe Tete. Now, before that, we have heard some other spokespersons suggest that this money was loan that was advanced to the woman. Nekwe Tete himself, in his letter, writes, and I quote the very last but one paragraph. He says, "I am a mere public servant who has given 21 years of honest and dutiful service to this country. My only crime is that I allowed my wife to accept help from Mr. Woyome with regard to her business. I have done nothing wrong." Nana, what I want to ask from you is that when you hear comments like this that suggest some conflicts, does it give you a lot of faith to want to continue to you know, believe in the people involved in all of this matter, including Martin Amidu?
You mean in the public servants?
Yes.
Well, Mr. Nekwe Tete has been directly implicated in the processes leading up to the payment of the money, the loss of the money to Mr. Woyome. He was the state attorney who did not go to court. He was the man who should have gone to court to defend the state. He did not. Now, when it comes out that he had actually received money from Mr. Woyome,
his wife,
well, or his wife, a close relative like the wife, had received money from Mr. Woyome, is highly suspicious, because he had played a direct role in the processes leading up to Mr. Woyome getting this money. But I'm sure those are the issues in court directly, and I'm sure they will be resolved. He's claiming that his lawyer or representative is claiming that they bought land. Well, if you bought land, there would be documents to show that.
Not his lawyer, rather. It's Woyome's lawyer who is saying it was for the purchase of land from the family. You
see, all of these things can be interrogated. You remember Mr. Obiama, my colleague, even though he did not play a direct role in Mr. Woyome being paid this gargantuan money, they said that he also had been paid some money in 2011 by Mr. Woyome, I think 75,000 cedis or so. He's explained it. He said it was for land, and that there's still a balance of 25,000 to be paid. He's brought the receipts for the land, the chief is there, and all of that. But these are matters that are still being interrogated. At the end of the day, documents will come out to show where the truth lies. So I don't have a problem at all. But Mr. Nekwe, because as we speak, he played a direct role in the fact that he did not go to court, and that allowed Mr. Woyome to get 105,000 million Ghana cedis charge on the state, and then subsequently he's supposed to have benefited from some financial benefit. It's very suspicious. But those are the matters in court that I'm sure it will come out. Let me just comment on this.
I was asking how much faith you have you come to a point where you are asking yourself, you know what, let me take a break. Let me just be a little careful how much faith I place in what the people, you know, in the middle of this whole saga are saying, including Martin Amidu. When you hear statements that suggest some conflict, very serious conflict. And this is very curious because it has been said earlier that this money was supposed to have been loaned. And then we hear Woyome's lawyer say that it was for land that was purchased from the family. And now we hear Nekwe Tete himself write and say that the only crime he committed was that he allowed his wife to accept help from Mr. Woyome with regards to her business.
That is what I have said, that all of these are very suspicious. I have said so already. So I've stated my position on the matter. Now, my friend Ajenim was talking about the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament is being used as a cover-up for NPP. Well, it shows a certain understanding of parliamentary work that is not justified. The Committee of Parliament consists of all the parties in Parliament. The Public Accounts Committee, like any other committee, is composed of all sides, NPP, NDC. The chairman happens to be NPP.
That's the arrangement.
And the vice chairman happens to be NPP, because the thinking is that you should not have people of the government party being chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. But there are, I think there's even a majority of NDC members on that committee. So if you say that it's being used to cover up or to prosecute an NPP agenda, then you don't understand how the processes work.
But don't you think on questioning of policy that maybe we need to have a real look at this particular arrangement, because I think that the framers of the Constitution has thought that by the time you had the minority in Parliament, you know, chairing this particular committee, the government in power, which has the majority, it will be their accounts that will be audited. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in a situation where the accounts that are being audited at the point always are accounts of the government that those who are chairing, you know, were part of.
that places additional responsibility on the chairman of the committee, because some of the matters that are being looked at, especially with Woyome, and some of the issues that will come up, would also touch on the NPP period. So that places additional responsibility on the chairman of the committee, because he was also a member of the former government. But I don't think anybody would then advocate that the chairman of the committee should be somebody from the government party, because the majority of the cases they will deal with in the next 4 years will be cases that involve the government and government accounting. See, the auditor, they deal with the Auditor General's reports. The Auditor General is supposed to report on the public accounts, how our monies have been used for the previous year.
All right.
So the way it is, it fits that purpose. It's just that for this particular matter, you have issues that go to the program. But it places it places additional responsibility on the chairman.
Okay.
And like I said, it's composed of all sides of parliament. So a chairman cannot let his partisan considerations or whatever, if there is, come into play. And indeed, so far, the conduct of the chairman and members of the committee have not, you cannot pigeonhole their conduct has been driven by
all right,
I've
got some text here, and I'm coming to you, Felix, and then Kwekuba, who would be last to speak on this matter. Now, just hold on for me. Bruce writes, an oppressive, corrupt, and inept government is to be feared even more than a tiger. Martin Amidu can only be described as an inscrutable maverick that his stunning revelations regarding the Woyome matter, quite frankly, we are sick and tired of the lackadaisical posture towards the pursuit of the scandal. Osayebons writes, the civil and criminal suits against Woyome will lead to nothing. Woyome will walk away as a free man. Woyome is just a con man used by the NDC to materialize their clandestine motives. Martin Amidu is a hero. Okay. Nekwitete disagrees with you. Ato Edu writes, without a doubt, there is a vast difference between Martin Amidu and people who speak for the government on the Woyome saga. Martin Amidu is credible, a citizen vigilante who needs to be applauded instead of the attempts to extinguish his crusade against corruption. Ghanaians should pray for the emergence of more Martin Amidus. All right. Baba Adam in Cape Coast, right? In fact, I am gargantually surprised at Martin Amidu for his attempt to face-saving citizen vigilante statement. I get the impression that he has a hidden agenda. This statement could have been communicated in a more professional manner. All right. Sami Inobuasi writes, I would be grateful if the government could come out with a state minister who defied the president's order by paying the money to Alfred Woyome. Derek in Ahafo, Kenya writes, Martin Amidu should spare our ears and tell us what he knows to bring this Woyome saga to an end. Askia Momorai Wa writes, the gargantuan nature with which the NDC wants to retain power at all costs is amazing. Abdul Rashid Kumasi writes, the actions of Martin Amidu is nothing but a gargantuan frustration on his part. Big Bomber in Wa writes, who really is in charge of the presidency? I guess you know the answer to that question is the president. No name. Martin Amidu is a coward. He should have come out a long time ago. Okay, you think he's a coward? Nana Intakradi writes, please tell James and Felix that I'm having sleepless nights because of the money paid to Woyome. Baba Bila Solomon writes from Navrongo. He says, Woyome here, Woyome there, Woyome all over. Looking at it from a wider perspective, it is rather Martin Amidu who loves the NDC. This case will never die. Mohammed writes from Kede, my 4-year-old boy said he wants to change his name to Woyome. What a gargantuan name. Interesting. You could call your son that. This one, no name, says, if the president can give such an amount to only one person but has decided to make the life of civil servants miserable, then what kind of a father is he? Now I come to you, Felix.
I'll just play the way involved.
Okay, Nana, this
one issue, and then I'll finish.
One issue. I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's why
strictly 2 minutes.
That's why
I'll stop you on the 2 minutes note.
My brother Jenny made a comment about the president and drawing the president, and I think that is interesting. You see, some of your text messages even reflect that concern. We cannot remain silent on the president's conduct in this matter. Samson, a lot of the correspondence on this matter were copied to the president, to the chief of staff office. Some of them were copied even directly to his office. Look at this Dufour's January 2012 letter. It was copied to the president. You want to look at it? It was copied to the... I'll show you. It was 6 January 2012. It's a report on the payment of judgment debt to Mr. Alfred. Very comprehensive.
We just want to attend
three. I haven't finished with it. I'll give it to you, Jim. Don't worry. I'll make copies for you since you said files are missing.
You know, it's not. It's
this particular
before it is admitted. Before it is admitted, you tender it. You are tendering it. Tender it. Let's see.
I'll finish with it and I'll tender it.
If he has no objection and it is authenticated, then you can go ahead.
No, the little point that I want to make is that this letter was. It was written to the chief of staff. January 6, 2012. It was also copied to the HE, the president at the castle.
This letter was written January 6, 2012. Is that what you said?
Yes.
2012.
Yes. Okay. And it was copied.
No, Felix, I think you gained another opportunity.
And it was copied to the president. It was copied to the vice president. But you see, when the president addressed the media conference at the castle. After this letter, he still gave the impression that he didn't know about what was going on.
But he knew the media from after
this letter. You see, so there are other issues. When he stopped the payments on 2 occasions, wasn't he interested? Who did he give the order to? Why wasn't the order carried out? What did he do to the person who refused to carry out his orders?
Okay.
And why wasn't he briefed?
That's a legitimate
and you
question
have you are the president.
That's where you end. Thank you very much. James has some issues with the letter you have tendered.
Yes. I think clearly this was not going to escape a reaction at all. Well, I think that I have followed particularly the Honorable Nana Akomia.
You're doing a very quick one today.
Yes, a brief one.
Felix,
you know, all he did was to say that, well, you can see some correspondence addressed to the Chief of Staff, copied His Excellency the President. He doesn't tell us what is contained in this document. What is this document about? This document was done.
Report on the payment.
Exactly. At a time when His Excellency the President
was seeking information.
Comprehensive report on it. I mean, how does anybody therefore come and sit on a program like this and attempt to portray to listeners and viewers that it makes the president complicit?
Okay, I'm sure that you know we highlighted the date. We highlighted the date on which it was written. So that should settle that matter.
The president has never stated anyway that he is unaware of the Woyome affair.
But at least he gave an impression from
the president said that he did not authorize monies to be paid to Woyome, and that is a statement of fact.
And that he was interested in those who caused the liability.
No, but listen, the president said he had given 2 instructions to Yoko. First, submit a report on the Woyome matter, and then go into the issue of judgment debt in totality, so that we see where the state has incurred liability and who was responsible for the liability. The president did not say that he was not interested in pursuing those who had acted in a way that had made the state incur this sort of loss. So I think that we must be very fair to the president. If you allow me. Again, the president's orders, both of them were carried out. The first order to the finance ministry, asking them to stop the payment of 41 million Ghana cedis, which resulted from a settlement that Mrs. Betty Modidrisu entered into with Alfred Woyome. That was stopped. Again, when the payment was stopped, Alfred Woyome went to court. He secured a court order compelling government to pay him 70 million. When it got, please, when it got to the president, Nana, if you allow me, something I think that you need to restrain now. When it got to the president that the state had been asked to pay 70 million, the president authorized Mrs. Betty Modidrisu to go to court and put in a defense. It was on that basis that Mrs. Idrisu started the case against Woyome, and it is that case that Mr. Matsamidu amended. Okay. So back to the point.
So how about the payments? You didn't know?
Yeah, so the president did not authorize any payment, and it's for that reason.
He didn't know.
It is for that reason that an investigation has been launched, and persons who are deemed to have acted in a manner contrary to the interest of the state are in court.
Now,
so let me come back to
now. Just can I tie this one in?
Yeah.
Where we are referring to the presidency, that they talk about the linkage to the presidency. In Nekwetete's response to Martin Amidu, in the 4th paragraph of his letter, the 4th and 5th paragraphs, I want to read just portions and then bring your attention to something. He says that there was a meeting at which he indicated that the last letter I had drafted for Mrs. Betty Moldidrisu was in September or October 2010, in which she recommended to the Minister for Finance that the first installment of 17 million should be paid as ordered by the court. I was therefore not aware of any letter recommending payment of 51 million since I had been on leave since October 2010 and only resumed work sometime in December 2010. We went through the files and realized that there had been another letter to the Ministry of Finance dated the 9th December. That's the point of note. Dated the 9th December 2010, signed by Mrs. Betty Moldidrisu. And that letter may have informed the decision of the Ministry of Finance to pay the entire 51 million. Now he comes to the next paragraph and the very last sentence. He says, for the information of Martin Amidu, Mrs. Idrisu indicated subsequently that the letter dated 9th December 2010 was brought to her notice by the Chief of Staff.
Fine. You see, that is why I've always helped.
This is my question. He says that this letter appears to be the one that endorsed the payment of the 51 instead of the 17 that was ordered by the court. And that this letter was authored by Betty Mold Idrisu. Now he comes here to say that Mrs. Idrisu's attention was brought to this letter by the Chief of Staff.
Well, Mr. Nekwete,
these are the contradictions that I find.
Mr. Nekwete furnishes no evidence to the effect that the Chief of Staff drew the attention of Mrs. Betty Moldidrisu to this particular letter. So we are unable to speak to it in any convincing manner. But you see, the point that I wanted to make is that whilst welcoming Mr. Amidu's scrutiny of the legal processes, statements like the one that he's issued and the first one that he issued do not help, because what it does is to, if you like, impugn the integrity of certain individuals without furnishing enough proof. You see, that the work of some persons at the Attorney General's Department is flawed in terms of the ability of the state to derive any benefit from their work. It's entirely different from saying that they did what they did because they were influenced one way or the other by the persons involved in that transaction. Mr. Amidu does not provide evidence. Indeed, the letter that, the advice that Kweku wrote, Kweku has disagreed with it based on what he says are consultations that he's held with persons who are knowledgeable in law. But the people who also argue that they are also trained lawyers and they feel that this is how things ought to be done. It may be flawed. It may not be the best quality of advice that they could have given. But it's Mr. Amidu saying that the persons acted in that manner because they were influenced by Mr. Woyome. Apart from Mr. Nekwete, no further evidence has emerged that, for instance, the Solicitor General or the other person, Mr. Adedewa, who is mentioned, received any material benefit which influenced their position. Advice. So I think that we ought to be careful. Again, it is not true that Mr. Amidu has made any revelation. The first statement that he issued, he made a wild allegation against an unnamed colleague cabinet minister. Subsequently, when he was given opportunity to prove his allegations, he failed and further misconducted himself, leading to his dismissal. I have always maintained that he had every opportunity in that statement to have stated in clear, unmistakable terms who that cabinet minister was and the nature of the crimes that he was talking about. He did not take the opportunity to do that. So I wonder why people are going on about he having made revelations. I know that the MPP finds it fit to make political capital out of this state. Why? They withheld the naming of their vice presidential candidate because of this Woyome matter. They said they wanted to make political capital out of it. So it tells you that as a party, they think that is a bonanza for them. And so all that they've been doing... They didn't say so. Well, it was in the news. I have not heard any convincing denials from the Nakumia or his colleagues in the MPP for that matter. But the issue is that... No, I'm not doing comedy at all. The issue is that the MPP, they have sought to project Mr. Amidu in a certain light for the purposes of parochial partisan interest. Why? Their track record does not tell me that this is a party that has ever been interested in projecting so-called whistleblowers. When their national chairman, Mr. Harune Eseku, blew the lid on the kickback collection syndicate at the castle, the MPP muffled him. They actually prevented him from going to Legon to chair a National Delegates Congress, in which he was contesting as one of the candidates for their chairman position. They actually prevented him physically from going there. When Mr. What do you call it? Fine, but he did not go there to chair. He should have chaired it. That is a fact. When Mr. Exactly, he was in a race. He was pushed to withdraw. He was stopped physically from going to the grounds. Really? He, as national chairman, was the one under whose auspices this thing was being held. He was not allowed. When Mr. PC Apiofori stated that some MPs had benefited from a $5,000 package in a Vodafone transaction, subsequently we heard him say that because of that allegation that he made, he had been ostracized by his colleagues in parliament. He even went as far as saying that he had been stripped of his membership of certain committees that he was on because of his expose. So how is it that the MPP takes these drastic measures to punish people within their ranks who expose corruption, and in another breath seek to project Mr. Hamidu, who has not made any specific revelations as far as this matter is concerned? But I think that we need to...
In the NPP time, we paid money
again,
like this to Woyome.
This issue about the documents, when Mr. Okujeto raised the issue, it was immediately dismissed as a charade. Indeed, the MPP legislated for all of us that the only issue that can be commented on by government and exposed persons is the Woyome matter, and that nothing else can be discussed. So immediately, it was assumed that he was talking about Woyome, when in fact, the minister went on to provide evidence that indeed there are a number of us. I mean, James read out most of them.
The government doesn't know where the files are.
Yes, but Nana Komia made the point that when you go to a ministry, I happen to have worked in a ministry before as an aide to the trade minister. Yes, it is true that you take letters and other documents to the registry. So that is where you go for those documents if you need them. But what happened was this. Persons who were close to the late Kojo Banredu, who worked with him at the finance ministry, and persons who have admitted, have sworn on oath that they indeed were the ones who carted the documents from the ministry, wherever it was kept, to the chief of staff, have given statements to that effect. Mr. Dr. Akoto has also confirmed this. When we came into office, we went to the chief of staff office, and there was no document. It is only reasonable that the minister will put out the fact that indeed no documents could be traced, and persons who were in possession of it must bring it. Dr. Rekubobe has confirmed it. The receipt given him was here. So, his agents came for it.
So how come 1 year after? How come 1 year?
7 FM, we're also coming to you live from the studios of Multi TV. This is your Joy News channel, and my guest, Nana Komia, Communications Director for the NPP, Felix Fosu Kwache, is a member. Kwachio Fosu is member of the government's communication team, and James Ejenim Boateng is Deputy Information Minister. Abdul Malik Kwekubako Jr. is managing editor of the New Crusading Guide newspaper, and he's got the last laugh on this particular matter.
Well, depends on how many minutes I have. But you know what? This PC Apiofori's allegation of $5,000, I think it should be thrown into the dustbin of history. He appeared before the Vodafone Review Committee and did not substantiate. Read the committee report. You see, that's why the standards we should set. He made allegation, all right. It became a matter of public interest and controversy. He appeared before the Vodafone Review Committee, and I'm sure you've seen the report.
Yeah, he could not substantiate, and yet in his subsequent public interactions,
absolutely.
No, I said we should set a standard.
All right,
that's the point I'm making. Otherwise, all of us are entitled to make allegations against each other and proceed with it.
So the same standard applies.
That's all right. I think we've been doing it, except that we are selective. And that's not right. The point I'm making is that selectivity, which informs because of our political thing, I think we should be very careful. I was talking of the competence and thing. Let's just about a minute on that issue. Back there, see, the memo, to be specific, this is what they said about that Ajimamenu letter. Clearly, it is my considered opinion, and I suspect this is the senior state attorney, because after reading Martin's thing, and I get a clearer picture. This letter, heavily relied on by the government of Ghana, is of great disservice to our case for the following reasons. One of which was there is a clear distinction between not being responsible for the legal consequences of a deal and paying a fee for a successful outcome of a deal which can be deemed to be beneficial to the interest of government at the time the deal was concluded. Some weird talk. But the truth of the matter is that the committee that did the evaluation of the proposals, the report is here. We don't have much time, so I won't read all. The committee, in assessing the Bank of Austria offer, listen to what they said in terms of the status. He says, Mega has issued notice of registration. Notice of registration, not a commitment. It's not a commitment by Mega, because not a commitment by Mega to issue a guarantee, and does not imply a judgment of the investment project. A final underwriting decision can only be made by Mega on the basis of corporate information to be complete information to be provided in the definitive application for guarantee, which is yet to be made by VAMED. Listen, Bank of Austria has provided letter of support. Comment: letter of support is not a binding offer of funds, but only indicative terms of conditions. Letter of support valid till September 30th, 2005. This is how the committee, headed by Van Dosu, evaluated the proposal. And that's what Safumafu's letter said. The proposals are inconclusive. If you recall, the 22nd August 2005 letter. And as I've established, you can go into the Procurement Act as well as this paper, this document, Procurement of Works, Tender Documents, Medium Contracts. It must go with the Procurement Act. It's known as Instruction to Tenderers.
Interestingly, you seem to be carrying the files.
I am educating myself on the matter. This is the way you make. No, can I finish?
Granted that.
No, maybe
Does it really impugn the integrity of the people involved?
No, it is the poverty of the legal advice, the poverty of it in the face of law, that they could easily have accessed the information in terms of the law. These people are me, bookshot legal expert like a guy like me. I've accessed this information. It's not beyond the Attorney General's office. Then why are they there? Look, it's dangerous if we have an office of that nature that is so inadequate. They cannot access this. These are basics. That's why I say if they had consulted the Public Procurement Authority, they'll get all this information. But let me proceed.
No, one question. Have you also averted your mind to the possibility that this is all deliberate?
But that's part. You see, I'm not.
The part of
you
the
know
officials.
what? You know what? So I don't want to speculate. No, it's an option, but I don't want to speculate on doing. I am sticking to the facts. Now listen to this last one. Leave the concurrent out. Listen to this. The award of the contract was subsequently terminated for some political considerations in relation to national security at the time involving Mr. Alfred Agbesi Woyome. This is evidenced by a letter from Mr. Alfred Agbesi Woyome dated 11 January 2010 and addressed to the Attorney General. This is the letter, and listen carefully. Mr. Tete, that's Agbesi Woyome, when he was challenging Kwame Tete's letter, if you recall. He says, Mr. Tete should be aware that I was deliberately sidelined, made to lose lots of money, and even arrested wrongfully 2 times. First, that I was dealing in small arms and dozens of uniformed police men forcibly entered the Supreme Court premises to effect my arrest. And secondly, just when I returned from Libya to arrange for the support of Ghana's bid in Cairo for CAN 2008, I was invited to answer questions on allegation of planning a coup. This gentleman, these legal advisors to the Attorney General, took this thing hook, line, and sinker, written by Woyome, and indicated that that was the basis for termination of the contract. If you have people like this assisting an Attorney General to fight a case, my goodness, you must have 6 eyes, and all of them are wide open.
Mr. Amidu did not possess this number of eyes. He failed to sanction them. He didn't take any step.
Please, I'm not making a case for Mr. Amidu. Please, listen carefully to me. I am not making, I supported the dismissal because I thought it was indiscreet.
Yes.
So I am not a fan of Martin Amidu as a person. We are looking at the issues. Now, let's talk about the missing files. And I'm entitled to that because I was on this program last week when it happened. We were discussing Woyome and Waterville. When my brother Okujutu slaughtered in this thing about missing files. And you can play back. He did not draw a distinction between the missing files and Waterville and Woyome. He did not. On this program. Indeed, he proceeded to refer to the missing Waterville file. Okay? He did not also give us specifics of files that had gotten missing.
But
he did not.
Him subsequently.
No, I'm coming there. On this program, he talked of missing files when we were discussing Woyome and Waterville. in explaining how come they've had challenges, he then spoke of the missing files. He didn't even talk about Ministry of Finance files. But in Kojo Mpiani's case, he said all the files were missing. Not a single file was left in his Chief of Staff's office. Subsequently, on Monday, as we speak, it appears we've even paid more, and we are left with some, if you look at the payment schedule, we are left with 2 or 3 payments to be effected. So almost, if you look at the Auditor General's report for 2010, some 70 million Ghana cedis extra.
Did you hear Ben Kumbo talk about pre-incorporation processes of a company processes, and also the fact that you can enter into a contract to enter into a contract?
Let me tell you something. Let me finish. Do you know they walked away with over 300 million Dutch mark in tax evasion?
We are being told so.
And is the parliament approved the waiver?
But were they given a waiver?
They haven't paid and they've gone. It's only parliament.
So nothing to do with
no, please. Look, my brother, please. You see, this is not a question of this government or that government.
Yes.
This is a question of how we actually conduct ourselves as a nation. It goes beyond that. And we should be clear about it. That this company, we've been having a running litigation with them, arbitration over a period. They claim we abrogated some contract, that's Ghana government. They claim that the loss of profit, we've been negotiating with them for a period. Are you aware that the sector ministry and the Ghana Highway Authority were not involved in all the processes that led to the settlement agreement? Are you aware that the final settlement agreement was signed only by the minister, no witness to it? Are you aware that they've gone away with over 300 million Dutch mark in taxes?
Taxes accruing from when? You must be specific in these matters. If state legislators were lax and allow that to happen, it cannot be heaped on this government.
No, but in settling.
The
figures were given.
I'm getting your point.
The figures were given as 284 million Dutch marks.
Yes.
And 5.2 million Ghana cedis in tax liabilities.
And the IRS was chasing them.
And then you pay them the money without
pay them the money.
Okay.
Couldn't we say, look, okay, let's even do a reduction?
Even then, you will ask
let me I am told that their tax liability is more than the money that they were seeking from us.
So I understand.
Is that what I'm told?
But it is even not late to get the money from them. The way people are speaking is as though it's a hopeless case.
Listening to Kweku, I feel even more convinced that the president is vindicated on this judgment debt issue. To the extent, because these are the very issues. You're asking very legitimate questions. And it is these same issues which informs the president's position that
all these payments were made on the blind side of the president.
Let's delve into
What would I thought of it one program and not two?
Let James
listening to Nana, listening to Kweku, I get even more convinced about the definitive position taken by His Excellency the President, and you get a clear sense that the President is vindicated in these matters. Because what is the President saying in all of this? Let us get to the bottom of this matter. How is anybody going to answer these questions we're asking?
There's a counter to what he said. I also feel very alarmed. Very, very alarmed that we can have a situation where this gangantua payments could be effected without due diligence, and the government was presiding over this country.
All right. On that note, let me. On that note, sorry.
But the point is, you are assuming that something has gone wrong, or that the payment was not legitimate.
All right.
Something is terribly wrong.
George Reginald Anoche in the United Kingdom writes, I want to find out from the NDC if they are claiming there are missing files in the AG's office. Then, on what basis did Betty Moldidrisu effect money payment to Woyome? Based on what files supported by the payment? When shall we, for once, between God and man, speak the truth to Ghanaians? And Parker in Saviligu writes, let us get something clear. Payment of judgment debt and all of a sudden missing, theft of related files, now going by Martin Amidu's first letter that appeared to suggest that some ministers fear they might be implicated, and now more prevailing evidence, or did you want to say revealing evidence, cast doubts on the authenticity of the payments. Is it not possible that these ministers and other public officials have something to do with the files? And another texter suggests that it's got a very interesting text. He says, it's interesting how land acquisition is playing up in the Woyome saga, and then the Lands Commission is raised down by fire. It's a very serious connection, very, very serious connection, very, very mischievous, I can see.